Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and to be honest with you, I do not know the direction that this video is going to take. I have a few ideas in my head, but I don't know which one I'm going to take, and maybe I'll end up taking all of them. I don't know. So if you're willing to hang in with me to see where this video might lead us, then I'm game if you are. The deck I'm using, because I like to give credit to the decks I use, is the Resurrected Kirchner Besançon Tarot, put out by the folks over at Deviant Moon. Patrick Valencia has done a number of decks. You might be familiar with the Deviant Moon Tarot deck, which is more or less a Wake Coleman Smith variety. But he also has put out a few Marseille-style inspired decks, like the Triomphe de la Luna, I think they're called. I have a few of those. And then he's also put out a couple facsimile decks of historic tarot decks. I mean, this is actually a real tarot deck. I didn't take note of the date of the original deck. Let's see if I have it in here. Of course, I'm not wearing my glasses, so you see any dates on that? Let's see. Nope, but I'm sure there's a date on here somewhere. I'm just not seeing it. But it is a historic Besançon that actually did exist. 1850 right on the box. So we know by the word Besançon that it's Swiss. And Besançon means that Jupiter and Juno replace the female pope and the pope. And there are other telltale signs that a deck might be from a certain country, like a lot of times for the Swiss decks, the Ace of Cups has a particular look. Oh, there it is, has a particular look, you know. That seems to be uniquely Swiss. I've seen it in the Gassman Tarot, which is not a Besançon, but it's also Swiss. And of course we have Juno. And sometimes the Hanged Man of a Swiss deck has a particular look whereby the hanged individual appears to be, excuse me, wearing a Swiss uniform. And there's Jupiter. You can also tell, you know, we know this is Jupiter, it's called Jupiter, and yet Jupiter appears to have breasts, right? And we know that Jupiter did not have breasts. So it's easy to understand how when one wood block carver was imitating or, you know, copying from an image that was probably also a little confusing, how they could make mistakes, you know, or misunderstand what they're looking at. Oh, look at this devil's got his tongue sticking out. Anyway, I don't know if I've passed the Hanged Man or not. You may have said, Marilyn, yeah, passed them already. Stop. Okay, here we go. Now, as far as I can tell, you know, typically what you see in a Swiss Hanged Man is a Swiss uniform, which this might be. It's reminiscent of that, but usually he's in profile, and this Hanged Man is not in profile. So, okay. So one of the things that I thought might be fun, and I don't, to talk about. I don't think I've ever done a run through of this deck, so maybe I can kill two playlists off with one stone if we call it a day and say this was a run through. You notice that even the Queen is holding the same type of cup that we see in the Ace of Cups. And as far as I know, this is not colored, you know, per Patrick Valencia. I mean, I think this is the way it is. I think he more or less allows the decks to speak for themselves. I think there's always something that has to be done in order to accommodate photographing it well enough to be able to be seen. I mean, maybe there are cases where the image is so dark, you know, he has to blast it with 1,000 tons of light, you know, where it wouldn't necessarily look like this in person, but in order to photograph it, you know, that's what had to be done. So that's possible. I don't know. I mean, I haven't spoken to the man, so I don't really know. But I think there's always something in the process of, you know, photographing a facsimile deck that needs to be done in order to make it able to become photographed for modern use. But one of the thoughts I was thinking of is maybe doing directionality. So here we have the first card out of the gate is a knight of coin. Most knights will carry a sword, so don't get like confused by the fact that he's got a sword. If there's ever, an icon other than the sword, it means that that's what it is, right? So we have the Knight of Sword, excuse me, I just said it, the Knight of Coins, galloping in a forward momentum, right? He's moving forward. So if you have your ideas of what the Knight of Coin might mean, you think of coin, which are the finer, represents the finer things in life that allow for well-being in life, comfort, right? And then we have a knight who is at the height of his career, who's at the top of his young self. I mean, he's not a king yet, but he's on his game. He's someone who's young and it could be said that he's at the top of his game as far as being young and energetic, and probably never be this young and energetic again, So he's moving forward towards something. And we know that his aspirations are typically things that have to do with the finer things in life. Okay, when we got the next card that immediately follows, and we see the Death card. And the Death card is an abrupt halt, right? It's like a reminder, a sober reminder. Not so fast, cowboy, right? Maybe take pause, Now, the Knight of Coins is, of all the knights, is probably the most level-headed of all the knights, But maybe there's still a stern warning, that maybe he's pursuing something that might not be to his best interest, right? Because death is coming towards him. Death isn't going in the opposite direction. I'm going to skip the pips for now. I'm just going to look at and this woman, she's got her eyes to the left. She's facing forward, but her eyes are to the left. So we could say that these two are looking in the same direction, or that this woman is looking at this woman to see what she's doing. Oh boy, what an ugly woman. Is that a woman? Yeah, it's a woman. Is it me, or she look like she has a beard and a mustache? Oh my goodness. And so, that's another good point. Maybe you don't want to get too hung up on those kind of details, or maybe you do. I mean, here we have the Queen of Coin. Here we have the Queen of Swords, right? They're both called Reine, so they both are queens. I had to do a double take to make sure this wasn't a king, because that is one ugly broad, right? But at any rate, if you get caught up in the fact that she's ugly, and maybe you can't help but notice that she's ugly, that could become a feature of the reading, Maybe there's an ugliness about this particular individual, who is just enamored by her coin. It could be seen like something like that. Or, you could just identify her as the Queen of Coin and not get caught up in the level of beauty that she lacks, I mean, this one is a more presentable looking woman, but, she's not necessarily Miss America either. So I don't know. I attended the workshop, or I participated in the workshop. I was a presenter over at Artisan Tarot, and they have, workshops every now and then, and they have guest speakers, and I was one of them. And actually, it was about the Hanged Man. We did one spread in the group, and you have the image and the origin story of the Hanged Man and what he represents. You know, it's like a punishment for a crime, and it's some type of disgrace, and maybe there's betrayal involved. But one of the people in the workshop, indicated that it didn't look like he was, in that particular deck we were using, which was the convert, it didn't look like he was being hung by his ankle as he is here, but by his heel, and he could have slipped out easily, and he could have escaped his punishment, which is great. If you see something like that, and if that's what immediately strikes you, then that's fine. Or if you look at the Hanged Man and you know what the Hanged Man represents, I think that's fine too. In either case, whether he escapes the consequence or not, the fact remains that he did something shameful, and that he, will be found out, and even if he isn't punished for it, like the slipping foot might indicate that he might not ultimately be punished, it's still a fact that, something like this did happen. So, and I think when you get some of these, wonky kind of decks that have a lot of ambiguity, and you're not always sure exactly what you're looking at, because the quality that survived after 200 years is not maybe the best. Or, when they were copying from an original source, maybe they just didn't understand what they were copying, and so they kind of fudged it, So you're going to have anomalies. You're going to have anomalies in, between one deck and another. And so you have to decide, or just play it by ear, really, if you're going to say, I'm going to notice all the anomalies, or I'm going to, interpret it as I understand what it should have meant, or what it should have looked like. Sometimes you can't get past the anomalies. I just love this moon card. I think it's so pretty. And it's interesting, because this is like the old style TDM1, with the full facing moon, right? Like in the Noble, we have the full facing moon instead of the side moon. And this is so many years later. This is 200 years after the Noble, so what gives? How do we have that in a deck that's so much older? One of my more curious fascinations is with the Page of Cups, or the Valet of Cups, Just always. And in this one, you can see that there's a top to like the chalice or whatever, that there's a top. So the thing is resting on the top. It's not just flat laying across an open cup. And so, in a card like this, like I know that he's the Page of Cups, the Valet of Cups, and so I know that, cups are emotion. Maybe he's a teenager, maybe he's somebody who's struggling with something emotional, right? Or just a youngster in the family who's very creative, or a poet or something like that. I mean, it depends on the question. But when I see the detail in some cards of the Page of Cups, where he's got the scarf, or whatever that thing is over it, it's kind of like he's got something under wraps. So the detail, the anomaly, right, brings new meaning, So if you notice an anomaly and that's really what stands out to you, then that's part of the equation. He might be all the things I already said, but he's got something under wraps. Maybe he's, involved in some kind of, emotional secret, It depends on other cards around it, what it could be. Yeah, see, we have the influence of TDM1 with the blindfold here. I love the use of blue in this deck, especially the, what is that, teal or aqua or whatever that is. I always like that in a tarot deck. You don't see it very often. Excuse me. Of course, that's Jupiter. And this Jupiter has, appears to have some breasts. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. So I don't want to repeat myself. And then this thing under her chin. It almost like in today's, it looks like she's wearing a mask, like a medical mask, right? I mean, that's like, what is that? And in this day and age, if you're doing a reading and you see something like that and it's kind of like an anomaly, I guess maybe it's a cuff, maybe it's a fancy collar, meant to match her dress. But like at any rate, it doesn't translate like this 200 years later. Who knows? I mean, maybe it could be, if you're doing a reading and it has to do with health and well-being, or, maybe the person's asking about COVID or something, I mean, how do you ignore that? You'd have to mention it, right? So I guess this video is about looking at the anomalies and, forgetting origin stories, or not that there was an origin story for the Queen of Baton, but, forgetting suit and, forgetting the combination of suit and person, right? You just see like a woman in a position of authority who might be letting her guard down. It kind of takes on a new meaning, right? If you incorporate the anomaly, and you see too how some of these, TDM style, even though this is Besançon, but essentially it's a TDM inspired deck. You see how they become so abstract, and it almost becomes impossible to understand what you're looking at. I mean, is this a chair back? And if so, why don't they match? And, here's a scale that's, you can see, but then this scale, what's going on here? What happened to the scale? Oh, the scale's over here. I'm sorry. Okay, so what's the scale doing over there? I don't know. Oh, I see it. The stick goes through. All right. I was initially looking over here and thinking, what? But, maybe somebody else, would be, who was copying it, might have thought the same thing. And then later said, oh, shoot, there it is. And just did it. I don't know. I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm just saying I can see how it can happen. Anyway, and then this blue feather coming from the heavens, what are they, like dusting and cleaning? Like what if, what if the person said, well, I'm having company, should I, what should I do to prepare? And you see this, I'd be tempted to say, you need to dust the heck out of your house. Maybe you need to dust the house, and that has nothing to do with the tower, right? So, tarot can be really funny in that way and fun in that way, because I can't help but see this as a feather duster, and despite my many years of study, depending on the question, if the question was about company coming and what can I do, or, should I allow people to come over, or, blah, 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 blah. If I saw this, I'd be like, well, maybe you need to dust the house out, Anyway. That's just me being silly with my very sick head cold that I got that I can't shake. I've been tested for COVID on Saturday, and I'm still waiting the results. I still haven't gotten the phone call. I don't know who to call. So, but I guess I'd be dead if I had it because I'm old and I'm in bad shape. But I have had both my vaccines and a booster, so I guess the worst of it, I'm just riding it out if that's what it is, but I don't think so. I think it's just a head cold. But I love the Ace of Cups and what's going on there. I should put my glasses. I should always wear my glasses when I do these videos, but I'm not always smart enough to put them on. Let's see. Just a little Just a tuft of flower. But you can see how the color misses the mark a lot of times, you know. And then, you know, and this is like a presentation. So it's out of doors on the one hand, but then we have like this curtain that's like, you know, like when you're at an event and you're like pulling up the curtain to show the grand sculpture or whatever it is that you want to show for the first time. And all of that is visual, right? You wouldn't get that just with a regular Ace of Cups, but you know, you have the suggestion that it's an outdoor thing and you have curtains and it's kind of like you're pulling the curtains aside, and so you have that association, you know. So, and that's why I think having a lot of tarot decks is fun, you know. I'm trying to justify my my problem, you know, for having so many decks, but you know, you can see, you know, how many different rabbit holes that tarot can take you, and the magic of tarot art. Now we see here the Hunchback, which is in the early Italian decks. He was known as the Hunchback and not the Hermit. And in fact, he's not called the Hermit here. Now, I'm not savvy enough to know what this means, but I wouldn't be surprised if it either meant the monk or the hunchback, you know, because he definitely has a hunched back and his walking stick. It's not it could be, you know, maybe it is a crutch. It doesn't look like a crutch. It looks more like a cane. But, you know, this is not just the Hermit, and maybe he's not the Hermit at all, you know, but he could represent all the things that we associate with the Hermit, but then we have the added, you know, the added thought that, you know, he's impaired in some way. And not just, you know, because of age. And I don't know if there's anything else I want to say. I just thought this deck would be a fun deck because it seems to have a few little oddities of its own. So I like how the kings seem to have, there was another king that had the same floor. Isn't that a pretty floor? A nice tile floor. Well, they're not the same floor. Maybe they are. And it's hard to know after all these years how they really looked in the beginning, you know. What colors have faded, what colors have bled, you know. What details have been lost. It's hard to know. Anyway, thank you for just hanging in there with me and taking a chance on what might be said on this video. I probably shouldn't do videos when I'm so sick, but I can't help myself. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.